Well, hey, you guys, happy Wednesday. I wanted to hop on this evening and share today's myth. If you missed the previous two videos, you may or may not know that this week is GT Awareness Week, Gifted and Talented Awareness Week. So I have committed to each night sharing a myth that we often believe to be true about gifted learners or an assumption that we make. And one of the things that I've shared each night is that so many of these that I'm sharing were beliefs that I had or assumptions that I made about gifted learners or even high achievers before I was given the opportunity to work exclusively with gifted learners. And it was through that experience and connecting with other educators and learning from them and reading that I began to realize so many of the things that I believed to be true about my gifted learners, it just simply wasn't the reality. And so when I began to understand who they were as learners and what they needed from the learning experience, it was a game changer. And so I thought, what better way to kind of celebrate this week, talk about this week, acknowledge this week, than to kind of explore those myths and to just say them out loud. And so on Monday night, we talked about the myth that gifted learners shouldn't struggle, right? That everything should come easily for them. They should play the school game well. That is definitely a myth. Not only should they struggle, or not only will they struggle, but they should struggle. It's productive struggle sometimes that prepares them for their lives beyond the walls of the classroom. We talked about in that video how struggle and failure is a detour. It's not a dead end. So definitely something you want to go back and check out if you missed it. Tuesday night, we talked about the myth that every gifted learner is an independent learner and how it could be a mistake to always give your gifted learners something to go and do while you're working with another group of learners, because sometimes even gifted learners need explicit instruction or they need support in whatever it is that they're working on. So while the goal is for sure them to become independent learners and for them to be able to work independently and have that autonomy, definitely the goal, that doesn't mean it's always the case right away. And we still have to give them the support that they need and deserve within their school experience. Okay. Tonight, myth number 3, we're going to be talking about the myth that every gifted learner has a love for learning. And I want to say this, I do believe that every learner somewhere inside of them does have a love for learning. I think a better way to put this myth may be every gifted learner is going to show evidence of a love for learning all of the time. That's just not the reality. One of the reasons I wanted to talk about this was because I was thinking about one of my students that I had when I did teach exclusively gifted learners in a gifted classroom. And he was a hard kid. He was difficult. He was apathetic. He was disengaged. He was frustrated with the learning experience. He just didn't want to be there, y'all. You probably have kids like that. And he would say things like, I hate school and I don't want to be here. And this is a waste of my time. And I remember when he first started coming to my classroom, I took it super personal. Like, I was like, what in the world? Like, I'm doing all I can to design these meaningful learning experiences, and all this kid can talk about is how much he hates it and how much he doesn't want to be here. And so the more I got to know him and the more we began to have conversation, I began to realize he was frustrated with his learning experience. He was tired of sitting through things that he already knew. He was tired of having to miss recess for not doing homework that he already understood. He couldn't figure it out. Like, why am I having to prove 25 times that I can do this really simple thing? And so he was struggling with what school looked like for him. And so if you know my story, you know that for me, Genius Hour changed everything, passion-based learning. And for this kid, that was definitely the case. When I began to make Genius Hour and passion-based learning a priority in my classroom, it was a game changer, especially for this kid. It really began to cultivate that love of learning in him. And he began to be willing to explore and ask questions. And it wasn't overnight. We still had those days where he didn't want to be there, and sometimes I didn't want him to be there because he made things so difficult. But we got to this place where he began to come into my classroom when he didn't have to be there. And he began to ask questions that he didn't have to ask. And I started to see this love for learning start to become more and more evident. And as I began to see that, he began to realize that it wasn't that he didn't love learning, it was that he didn't enjoy his school experience. So I just wonder, how many kids is that true for? That we miss maybe their giftedness. We don't even see that they're gifted because we're so focused on maybe their misbehavior or their frustration or their apathy or their maybe it's their being disengaged. We can get so focused on their weaknesses that we sometimes miss their strengths. So I just wanted to take some time to encourage you that not every gifted kid is going to be excited to be at school and is going to be a leader in the classroom. That's just not always going to be the case. That is a myth. It is an assumption that is not, it's not okay to make. We have to be willing to really acknowledge who they are as learners, what they need from us. And as educators, we have to be willing to take risks and do some different things to give them what they need. So tonight's myth, every gifted learner loves learning. Yes, they do somewhere in there, but we have to figure that out and we have to help them find that love for learning. And like I just shared, sometimes that requires us to take a risk, do something different. More than anything, it requires us to have a relationship with them and be willing to ask questions, listen to what they share, and pivot when we need to give them what they need as learners. So I am really excited about the next two myths that are coming up. They are big ones for me. I've been wanting to talk about them all week, but I've held back. So Thursday and Friday, make sure you guys check out the videos. You can find all of these videos on my Facebook page, A Meaningful Mess. Thank you so much for listening this evening. I hope you get some rest, take some time for yourself, and I'll talk to you soon.